We have an exciting presentation for you all. I'm so glad that you were able to join us. Study skills for success, I think, is a skill set that you all are going to be looking forward to getting a handle on. If you're somebody that studies on the regular, or if you were like me as a student that was pretty strong academically and didn't necessarily need to study as much, let me tell you, when you get into university level, you're gonna need those study skills. So we are joined today with Bill Sun from USABO, gold medalist, and we will be joined in a bit by Megan Elliott from NAMI Greater Wheeling, who will tell you a little bit about stress management skills during those high impact exam periods during the school. So first, before we start in on our presentation, we'll do a quick overview on CEE and everything that we present to you. So the Center for Excellence in Education, as many of you know, was founded in 1983 by Joanne DeGennaro and the late Admiral H.G. Rickover, who is the father of the nuclear navy and civilian uses of nuclear power. Our mission here at CEE is to nurture high school and university scholars to careers of excellence and leadership in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM, and to encourage international collaboration between and among leaders in the global community. We have a number of programs at CEE. So first, we have RSI, the Research Science Institute, which is a highly competitive 6-week summer science and engineering program open to rising high school seniors. Juniors are eligible to apply. RSI is the first cost-free summer science and engineering program that combines on-campus coursework in scientific theory with off-campus work in science and technology research. Then, of course, we have the USABO, the premier U.S. biology education and testing program for high school students. It provides the motivation, curricular resources, and skills training to take them beyond their classroom experience to the level of international competitiveness. Since CE began administering the USABO in 2003, every member of the USA Biolympiad team has medaled at the IBO, including our speaker today, Bill Sun. Next, we have TEP, the Teacher Enrichment Program. TEP provides opportunities for middle and high school teachers to connect with leading experts from industry and academia, explore cutting-edge research and development, and make meaningful professional links with direct benefits for teachers and students. Finally, we have our program here today, STEM Lyceums. STEM Lyceums is a virtual club for high school students to meet once a month to learn about STEM career pathways from leading field experts. We also meet with industry professionals, and they share cutting-edge research and offer unique learning experiences like scholarships and internship opportunities for high-achieving students. For more information about our programs, please follow the link that will be in our chat. All right, we're going to go ahead and start with our first speaker, Bill Sun, USABO 24. Bill Sun is a senior at Seven Lakes High School in Katy, Texas, whose main interest lies in computational biology. He won an International Biology Olympiad gold medal in 2024 and made the national finals of the USA Biology Olympiad in 2023 and 2024. Additionally, he has published a computational biology paper in SciAm and recently conducted research in computational optimal foraging. Aside from biology, he's also a 4-time All-States cellist and captain of his school's Science Olympiad team. In his free time, Bill enjoys playing ultimate frisbee. So, well-rounded, and we'll hear all about his background and skills.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bill. I'll just say a little bit more about myself. Here I am with my 3 other friends at the IBO. So I do the USABO, which is a biology competition across the nation, and it's used to select 4 of the top students from the US to represent the US internationally at the Olympiad. And it's sort of similar to the Olympics, but for biology. And so I ranked 6th in the world, giving me a gold medal. And aside from that, I'm also a 2-time USA Biology national finalist. So this is a program that they use to select the IBO medalists. Aside from that, I also participate in Science Olympiad, and I've done a number of events, not just biology. I've competed in all manner of events, from physics events to engineering events, and even events using CAD. So I'm pretty well versed in studying for all types of different kinds of competitions. And if you want to contact me with any questions, my email is right there. So today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about how to study effectively for the competition. And many people think of biology. If you were to first think of biology, many people's first instincts is to think of biology as a memorization contest. And this is simply not true. Actually, the Usabo is, I would say it's two parts. Yes, there is some memorization, as is necessary for its participants to understand like biological concepts and some words, certain words that we use to describe things in biology, but most of the Usabo is actually focused on problem solving. So we'll divide how to study for both of these things into two separate parts, how to memorize effectively and how to problem solve effectively. And both of these are required, but you need different approaches when studying to be a well-rounded competitor. And in my personal opinion, memorization tends to be more difficult and boring, but that's okay because it's not the entirety of the use book competition, right? And actually, interestingly enough, a lot of really good problem solvers can compensate or are able to compensate for a lack of knowledge with problem solving. So the way the USABO is designed is a lot of questions will provide information for you to be able to solve the problem without having to know everything that's written in the problem. So you'll be able to reason through using biological concepts, you'll be able to reason through a lot of problems without actually having to memorize a lot of information. And on the right here, I just have the canon, so-called canon biology textbook, Campbell's Biology. Many times, this is all the biological knowledge that you'll need. You don't really need necessarily specific knowledge to fields. You don't need to be like an expert in any particular research field. Usually just introductory level undergraduate biology is enough to solve a lot of these problems as long as you can reason through them. So first we'll start with memorization because I would say this is the more straightforward of the two, but it's also the more tedious and, in my opinion, more difficult of the two, generally just because it tends to be boring. So generally, whenever you're trying to memorize things, there are two things that you need to learn how to memorize in the useful competition, and you need to learn how to memorize concepts, and you need to learn how to memorize facts. So facts are just straight up statements, right? A lot of the times you'll be using these to solve certain questions that involve a lot of trivia, or maybe questions that, you have to memorize a lot of facts about certain kinds of species of animals or taxonomy. Those are examples of memorization based on facts. However, a lot of times questions will also ask you to compare certain concepts, be able to draw on like a web of knowledge from your conceptual understanding. So the memorization for concepts is a little different than the approach for facts. But both of these have a few general things in common that you can use to study both of these. So first, this is a big one. It's more of a psychological tip in it, if anything else, study in the same place every single time. And a lot of people like to go, to the library to study or study in different places of their home. I would say to study effectively, it's generally more efficient to choose one spot and study in that same spot every single time and avoid all distractions. So put your computer far away, put any sort of games far away. This is generally the most effective way to study. And psychologically, if you do this enough times, when you sit down at that spot to study, you'll begin to develop a habit, and it becomes easier to study and sit down even on the days that you don't really feel like studying. Right. Another thing is that rereading is generally much less effective for studying and relearning material that you may have forgotten than relearning with different materials. So what I mean by this is, for example, Campbell's Biology is the premier biology textbook, right? It's less efficient to just reread the same chapter or passage multiple times to try to remember things. It's generally more efficient to take a different biology textbook, for example, or find a resource online, find a video, some different kind of learning medium, and expose yourself to different explanations of the same topic. And in this way, you'll be able to develop your own conclusions about how to memorize a particular concept regurgitating a textbook. Another thing that I like to use is to take paper notes. I know a lot of people like taking notes online using, any manner of online word editing software, but generally taking paper notes is much better for your memory. Writing is good for memorization. Writing down things links your brain to those facts, and it really helps save a lot of time in the long run. I'm also going to talk about using Anki, which is a flashcard software that I use and many biology students use. Actually, it's very famous in the medical industry and among med students because many med students use Anki to memorize anatomy diagrams, any kind of medical facts or diagnoses that they need to remember, they use Anki. And this is a flashcard app icon to the right. It's one of my favorite apps. The last thing I'll say for general tips is that you should try to use paper textbooks whenever available. Reading a paper textbook is faster for multiple reasons. First of all, humans are much better at reading physical objects, paper textbooks right in front of them than online ones. And secondly, online textbooks give a lot of leeway for you to be distracted, right? It's very easy because your computer is right there. It's very easy to just pull up a YouTube video and easily get sidetracked or pull up a Wikipedia article if you want to research something, right? It's really easy to get sidetracked with a computer on an online textbook. So I strongly recommend, whenever possible, use a paper textbook. I know paper textbooks are expensive, but especially with the case of Campbell's biology, many of your upperclassmen peers or even school districts will have copies of these textbooks for free, and you can just ask and borrow them. If this isn't available to you, you can find extremely cheap versions of this at a lot of used bookstores and online. I have several friends who got copies of Campbell's for less than $1 and pretty new editions too. So you don't need to buy a new copy, and there's no need to spend a bunch of money on these textbooks, but you do need a paper textbook. Finally, I will say memorization cannot compensate for problem solving. What does this mean? So in the USABO, because biology is such an expansive field and there's so much to talk about, right? Not just medicine, which is the form of biology most people are familiar with, but we can talk about plant biology, biosystematics, genetics, molecular biology, the list goes on and on and on, right? You can't memorize all of this stuff. It's not only unrealistic, it's just an inefficient approach to problem solving, right? And because the USABO asks you to solve biological problems, which are these format of problems are the kind of problems you might deal with as a researcher, as a doctor, or even as a undergrad student in any of your classes. You'll probably deal with similar problems. And you can't just memorize a bunch of information and expect to be able to solve the problem. So the approach to memorization, you should not take it as a regurgitation or like a memory exercise. And what I mean by this is when you sit down and read Campbell's biology for the first time, you shouldn't be trying to memorize it word for word. This kind of repetition just isn't a good use of your time, and it's not really useful for the competition either. The USABO will never test you on things like, what is the format of this sentence? Or can you fill in the blank for a particular quote? That's just silly, right? This isn't an English class. You aren't expected to memorize things like that. What you will be expected to memorize are key concepts and facts that are like biologically relevant and you can use to make conclusions about problems, right? So with this in mind, let's now look at Anki. Anki is the software of choice for most people who compete in USABO for memorizing things efficiently. I'm sure you guys have heard of Quizlet. It's a software that people use for flashcards and learning, but Anki is like Quizlet, but better, and it's free. It uses a specific software algorithm called spaced repetition to show you cards that you're good at less and show you cards that you're worse at more times so that you sort of even out your studying. You don't need to study over and over things that you already know, but if you're bad at something, you should study it more. And that's how Anki works. It's really useful for memorizing facts long term. Usually people use Quizlet to cram a bunch of information the last minute before a test, right? But the USABO has so much information that this is a really inefficient approach to memorization. You will never be able to cram a bunch of things right before your USABO exam. A lot of people study months, years in advance because there's just so much information to cover. So you use Anki as a way to memorize these facts for a long term so that you don't forget them. So you can do this every day. Anki will give you a certain set of flashcards every day that you can go through, and it chooses the flashcards that it thinks you need to review the most. And you only need to spend 10, 20 minutes a day, depending on how many flashcards you have. And in my opinion, it's really good for downtime study because at any point in time, you should pull out your phone, do a couple flashcards, when you're on the bus or you're walking to school, things like that. It's really good for studying in places where you don't have space or the time to take out a textbook and read. Right. So after you download the Anki software and go through all the setup process, the main thing that you'll be tasked with is how to make flashcards. Now, there are many, many online flashcard decks that you can download, but I highly recommend you make your own because not only does making your own flashcards help with memory, it's also a more effective way of studying because many of the flashcard decks you'll find online are not well made. And you'll see what I mean by that in a bit. The flashcards we'll be looking at are called closed flashcards. And this is Anki's special term for fill-in-the-blank flashcards. Usually flashcards, you'll have like a term on the front and a definition or something of the similar quality on the back, but these are fill-in-the-blank instead. And you can organize them in various ways. And to create a fill-in-the-blank, you just use a keyboard shortcut, highlight the text you want to fill in the blank, and Control-Shift-C. It's pretty simple. Getting onto what I mean by creating good flashcards. Whenever you want to make flashcards, you want to make them in an effective way so that you're memorizing the important key details rather than trying to or getting bogged down in the phrasing of the flashcard or the way the question's asked, right? So I have an example of a flashcard here from my deck, and you can see you can Control Shift C to make this into a fill in the blank. But this is an example of a flashcard that will be considered good, right? The key features of this kind of flashcard are that one, the fill in the blank must be relatively short. You don't want a paragraph of text. Memorizing a paragraph of text is a really inefficient and bad way of making a flashcard. You also don't really want lists. You don't want to have bullet points. There are ways to get around having to list things if you have to memorize lists of things. But generally, you shouldn't have them in your flashcards. Lastly, you don't want flashcards that are too long. They don't really have to be grammatically correct. This one is just by coincidence, but you just want to have the key details in each flashcard. So for example, here, the key details are sponges are animals, they don't have tissues, they have mesohyl, and 2 layers of cells. So those are the key details, right? You want to focus on these key details when you're making flashcards, and you'll see many of the decks online don't follow these rules very well. They'll have long paragraphs of text, ask you to memorize like lists and things like that, and that's just really bad flashcard writing. Humans aren't really well designed to memorize information in that way. We're much better designed to memorize information in this kind of short fill-in-the-blank method. Okay, next I'll talk about problem solving. In my opinion, this is the biggest part of USABO, actually. This is the part that differentiates so-called campers, the national finalists, and the IBO team members from everyone else, because anyone can pick up a textbook and read, right? And really, although it's annoying, it's difficult, it's tedious, it's not that bad to memorize a bunch of things. More or less, everyone can do it. The part that differentiates the really good USABO competitors from just the mediocre ones is the way they solve problems. And problem solving, if you've ever done like Math Olympiad or any of the other Olympiads, you'll know it's repetition, repetition, and repetition. You just do problems, many sets of problems to gain a good understanding and intuition of how to solve problems. There are practically infinite resources online for different kinds of biology problems you can do. The USPO site has plenty of past practice tests. I think they go all the way back to like 2010 or something like that. There are a lot of them. So you have opens and semifinals tests. And then if you're bored of those, there's IBO tests going all the way back to like the 1980s, I believe. So there are plenty of those you can take. And if you still run out of tests after that, all sorts of people in the USABO community among the competitors have made their own practice tests, like mock practice exams that you can take. So there are so many resources and problems you can take. You'll probably never run out of them. Another thing is you'll want to talk to other USABO competitors and learn from them. So one thing I did early on when I was learning USABO for the first time when I was a freshman was I would talk to people about problems I didn't understand, especially older USABO competitors. I would ask them to explain to me how to solve a problem. I'd ask them about their methods to solve a problem. This is generally the most effective way to learn how to problem solve, especially because a lot of times online resources for how to solve problems won't be very thorough. There are a lot of resources on tests, right? There are a lot of questions, there are a lot of answers, but there aren't a lot of explanations. And that's the part that you have to come up with yourself a lot of the time. On the right here, I have an example, classic example of problem solving in the USABO. So this right here is called a pedigree. It's a way of illustrating hereditary relationships in genetics. And a common USABO question is that students will be asked, like, what kind of disease does this pedigree show? Or what kind of trait is being passed on, right? Usually people use pedigrees. Doctors will use pedigrees to tell patients or prospective mothers, like, what is the chance that a child might have a congenital genetic disorder? Or what is the chance that you might present with a congenital genetic disorder in the future, like with Huntington's disease, right? So common USABO problem will be asking you, how do you analyze this pedigree? Or asks you to analyze this pedigree. Textbooks will tell you roughly the concept of a pedigree, some basic analysis techniques, but a lot of the analysis techniques that you'll learn in USABO, you have to figure out on your own after analyzing a lot of pedigrees, right? You'll begin to understand pattern formation and be able to figure out how to analyze pedigrees on your own. And this is just one basic example. So right here, I have a problem taken from the IBO 2017. It was in United Kingdom. This is the theoretical A paper for those of you who are curious. And this is a classic example of a biology problem, right? Probably doesn't look exactly like what you expected. Maybe you would expect a one-line question with like one-word answers. No, that's not how it works in USPO. So this is a good example of what I'm talking about, where memorization is not a replacement for problem solving, but problem solving can sometimes be a replacement for memorization. So this problem is about oak galls. And for those of you who don't know, oak galls are they're like outgrowths of trees that happen sometimes when a tree gets injured, is stressed, attacked by insects. It kind of looks like a bump growing on the outside of the tree. And so let me walk you through this problem and see how we can solve it, even if you don't know what an oak gall is, or if you don't know anything really about this problem, right? Again, you'll need to know some basic level of biology, and that's where the memorization comes into play, just so you can understand the language in the problem. But past a certain point, you don't need to memorize, for example, exactly English oak. You don't need to memorize that English oak can have galls. You don't need to memorize that gall wasp larvae produce these galls. Those kinds of things are a waste of time. So here, let's solve this problem together. So we're told that auxin is a plant hormone. This is something that you will have to memorize and learn. Auxin is a plant hormone with roles in environment development interactions. So for example, we have an oak tree, which is attacked by a certain kind of insect or insect larvae, which causes galls to grow. And we know, because it's said in the problem, auxin can cause tumor growth. So this is why I'm saying maybe you didn't need to memorize that. Sometimes it's your lucky day, right? But auxin is degraded by oxidation. So plants will use this certain enzyme to control oxidation of phenolic chemicals. And again, you don't really need to know exactly what phenolics are. It's useful and it may give you more confidence, but you don't need to know it for this problem, which you'll see in a bit. Auxin is not a phenolic compound. So down here, we can see phenolic compounds look like this. Number 2, auxin looks like this. So then we're given that different chemical fractions are taken from galls and mixed with auxin and an oxidizing agent. So we then measure how fast auxin gets oxidized. And you can see in the graph here, we get this information. Then we're asked 5 true or false questions. So in order to approach this problem, first of all, it's a lot. I chose a relatively short problem because I thought nowadays usable problems tend to be very overwhelming. They're pages and pages long. There are some usable problems that are 2 or more pages long with just text and background for the question, right? But I chose a relatively short one, but it's still a lot of information to process at first glance, right? But here, we're actually given all the information we need to solve the problem. The first question, for example, auxin activity is high in galls. So we're given that auxin can cause tumor growth, and we're given that it's degraded by oxidation. Well, if we take a look at this graph here, we can see that in a healthy extract, that is an extract not from a gall, the auxin oxidation rate remains relatively constant and high. But in the gall extract, it dips precipitously whenever the extract or fractions containing phenolic compounds are added. And as you saw earlier in the problem, oxidation of phenolic chemicals is controlled by this enzyme, but auxin is not a phenolic compound. So we know a little bit of information. So we know that auxin causes tumor growth. So maybe you should immediately be able to tell the answer to this first problem is true, because galls are a form of tumorous growth, and it's told to you right here in the problem, right? Second question, compounds in fractions 6 and 17 are oxidized more easily than auxin. Now, again, you don't even know what compounds are in these fractions. You just know that they're phenolic compounds, right? And it takes a little bit of problem-solving practice, but an experienced USABO competitor, after doing a lot of problems, will be able to tell, okay, what's going on here is that these phenolic compounds are oxidized, or they have their oxidation controlled by an enzyme, okay? And normally, like even when we add phenolic compounds to a healthy extract, nothing happens, or nothing very severe happens. So we know that phenolic compounds don't really affect auxin normally. But in this gallic extract, whenever we add phenolics, it severely drops the oxidation rate. So using a little bit of induction, we can predict that perhaps this oxidizing agent, whatever it may be, oxidizes the phenolics first. And after it's done oxidizing the phenolics, then it begins oxidizing the auxins again. And that's why it raises. And this kind of problem solving or intuition is something you develop after solving a lot of problems, right? And this just one example. I won't walk through the rest of these problems, but this is the kind of thing you'll see. Now, in the next page, you'll be able to see the 2017 IBO was very unique in that it had solutions and it had explanations for those solutions, but most of your problem sets won't be this generous. And that's where talking to past USPO competitors and things like that will come into play. But here you can see that you can learn from your mistakes. For example, if we made a mistake, we can read the explanation for why the particular answer is correct. And this kind of repetition and learning from your mistakes is the most important part of USPO competition. It's almost as if you are a machine learning algorithm and you're training yourself on training data. That's sort of how this works. So in order to do that effectively, you need to always look back and reflect on the problems you did, the mistakes, and why you got problems wrong. It's not enough to just solve the problems. You need to know why you got it right, why you got it wrong, right? That's all I have for you guys today. If you have any questions, you're free to ask in the Q&A session afterwards, but I hope you guys got something out of this presentation. Hopefully it will help you in your future USPO studying, and thank you.
Thanks, Bill. That was a great presentation. I learned a lot. I remember when I was in school a million years ago, we also had Anki, but it wasn't as advanced as it is now. So seeing how far it's progressed today is pretty cool to see. So we are going to move into our next portion. So I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Megan Elliott. Megan Elliott is a Family Services Navigator at the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, where she facilitates family support and education programs, provides suicide intervention and mental health trainings, and works to raise awareness on mental health. A 2019 graduate of West Liberty University with a Bachelor of Science in Psychology, she is a dedicated mental health professional and a trainer in courses such as mental health first aid, SafeTALK, and crisis intervention training. We will be speaking on stress management techniques and how to take on that exam period during the school year.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. Happy to be here with you guys this evening. I'll welcome everyone. I'm super excited to be here with you this evening. So we all know that balancing school, exams, and day-to-day life can be a major stressor. I remember what it was like when I was in college a few years ago, trying to balance all of those things. So today, hopefully, you will learn how to effectively manage your stress through some different techniques and some self-care tips. And at the end of the presentation, you will have a personalized plan to reduce stress and improve your performance during exams. The stress is a normal part of life, and when it is managed well, it can actually be a really helpful tool. Stress is motivation. So without stress, we would not have the motivation to get out of bed, to do well in our classes, to study, to go to work. But stress becomes a problem when it becomes the bad kind of stress or it becomes overwhelming. So we're going to watch a quick video here to gain a better understanding of what stress is and how it impacts us.
Let's talk about, in today's episode, we're talking about stress. Stress can pop up from all over the place throughout your everyday life, but stress by itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. I know. In the right amount, stress could actually focus and motivate you. For example, the stress of a big exam coming up at school can drive you to study harder. However, too much stress or stressors that are too big for you to handle can overwhelm you. Now keep in mind, our reactions to stress are shaped by a number of factors, including past experiences. So if you've been through trauma, it may make it more difficult to deal with the everyday stress in your life. Small stressors may feel overly big to you because they're actually triggering painful memories from your past. If you think this might be the case, a therapist can help you work through those feelings and develop strategies for handling them. Now, understand that stress is unavoidable. It's just a part of being human. But as humans, we also have the ability to manage our stress, allowing good stress to motivate us while developing strategies to deal with the more toxic stress. Some of those strategies include things like planning your day, eating healthy foods, and exercising regularly, practicing deep breathing, getting a good night's sleep, asking for help from friends, family, and teachers when needed, as well as speaking with a therapist or mental health professional. Remember, everyone reacts to stress differently, so it's important to find the coping strategies that work best for you. There will always be some amount of stress in your life, but the key is how you react to it. Managing stress is a skill, just like any other. The more you work at it, the better you'll get. And in time, you'll find yourself so much better equipped to handle the events that life throws at you.
Hopefully you guys liked that little video. I thought it was cute and did a good job of explaining stress and how it can be good and how some of the ways it can be bad. So when stress takes over, it affects more than just our minds. It can affect our body as well in many different ways. We may experience headaches, fatigue, muscle tension, or even digestive issues. Our immune systems can also weaken, making us more susceptible to illness. I don't know about you guys if you've ever experienced this. I know that I certainly did, and classmates certainly did. It seemed like around exam time, everybody was suddenly coming down with, the flu or a cold or some other kind of illness, and it was often due to that weakened immune system because of that high level of stress. So it's really important that you begin to recognize the signs when your body is maybe telling you to slow down, to rest and practice some self-care so that hopefully you can negate some of those physical effects that stress can have on our bodies. And it does have an emotional and mental effect as well. It affects, maybe making us feel anxious, more irritable, unmotivated, or overwhelmed. If you've had those moments where you have so much to do, but you just can't do it. You feel like, where do I even start? How do I begin? Instead of picking a task to focus on, you just lay there and get more and more stressed as time continues to pass by. Again, it's important to recognize those mental and emotional signs of stress in ourselves so that we can address them before they get to a debilitating level. Some common exam stressors. This can come from multiple sources. It can be things like fear of failure, feeling that pressure to succeed, and oftentimes unrealistic expectations that we put on ourselves or that we feel others put on ourselves. Poor time management and lack of preparation are also two really big ones, two really common ones that can really add to a person's stress level. And probably the biggest one of all for college students would be that sleep deprivation. It is one of the biggest contributing factors to poor performance. Funny enough, today is actually National Sleep Awareness Day. And I was just at another university talking with students about how important it is that you get that 7 to 9 hours of sleep, a minimum per day. I know that sounds like a lot of time when you're in school and oftentimes working and have other obligations as well. But making sure you're taking care of your brain and your body and giving yourself time to rest can go a really long way in ensuring that you stay healthy, both physically and mentally. Staying organized is one of the best ways to manage stress, especially during that hectic exam season. When we have a plan, we feel more in control and less overwhelmed. Organization prevents that procrastination or that feeling of not being able to get started, saves time, and helps us to focus more effectively. So some of the key ways organization can reduce stress are it can reduce and overwhelm that procrastination. So when tasks pile up, they can feel unmanageable, leading to avoidance. And by breaking them into smaller, more achievable steps, we can create a clear action plan. It saves time and boosts efficiency. So having organized study materials, organized notes, and a schedule to help us stay on track prevents us from wasting valuable time searching for those notes, searching for that textbook, and cramming last minute. Organization also creates a sense of control and reduces anxiety. Uncertainty can be a really major stressor, so having that structured plan removes that uncertainty, making the task feel more manageable. Organization also can improve our focus and concentration. This is a big one for me. Having a clutter-free workplace and structured approach to reduce distractions helps our brains to stay focused on the task at hand. I know the previous speaker talked about, studying in the same spot. So another thing you can do is making sure that workspace is always clean. Cleaning up your trash, not leaving any, food crumbs or anything like that, but having it neat, clean, and organized is another guaranteed way of being able to help you successfully study. Organization also helps to prioritize and balance our tasks. It allows us to focus on the most important tasks first, while also making time for self-care and breaks to avoid that burnout. Good time management is also essential for reducing stress during exam seasons. So planning your study sessions in advance, using a planner, prioritizing different topics, setting realistic deadlines. And that's a really big one, is being realistic in what you can get done. We oftentimes put these unrealistic deadlines on ourselves. We put too much pressure, and then when we fail those deadlines, it makes us feel defeated and even more stressed out. So making sure you're giving yourself a period of grace when it comes to your deadlines. It's also important to incorporate short breaks that helps to improve productivity and reduce burnout. And I'll talk about a specific method of that here in a few more slides. Physical activity is another really great way to release built up stress. It can be something as small as taking a 10-minute walk, stretching, or even engaging in regular exercise. Research shows that a minimum of like 15 to 20 minutes a day of physical activity is largely beneficial, not just for your physical health, but for your mental health as well. So even if it's not something maybe you do in the middle of studying for a break, just incorporating that physical activity routine into your day-to-day life can benefit your mind and benefit your body and reduce some of that stress. Regular movement also enhances focus and supports our overall well-being. Mindfulness and relaxation techniques. So these are ones that I think in the past few years have become really big when it comes to the work life and the school life. I teach a lot of classes like these in the middle schools and high school. Practicing mindfulness can help us reduce stress and improve focus. And by mindfulness, we just mean kind of focusing on how you're feeling in the moment, how your body feels, how the environment around you feels. Maybe you're being mindful about how, the gum that you're chewing tastes. But it has shown to reduce stress and anxiety levels. This can be done through deep breathing exercises, guided meditations, journaling, gratitude practices. There are a lot of really great and really helpful guided meditations or guided mindfulness exams that you can find through resources like Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. That I like to use a lot whenever I am studying or working on a really tough project. In particular, I don't know if you guys have heard of this or not, but a type of music called lo-fi. It is really relaxing. You can find all sorts of different styles of it, but it's just, for the most part, instrumental music designed to help you focus. Some are designed to help you relax. Some are designed to help you sleep. And I have found that to be a really helpful tool in practicing that mindfulness and relaxing when I'm feeling stressed out. Proper self-care plays a huge role in stress management. Like I mentioned, aiming for that 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night, eating a balanced diet, limiting caffeine. So getting that proper amount of sleep, having a healthy and balanced diet, including making sure you get enough protein, enough fats, your complex carbs, all of your fruits and vegetables is really important. A lot of times we don't realize, or the general public doesn't necessarily realize, that a lot of the chemicals in your brain that help to improve and balance mood are actually made in the gut. So it's really important that we have a healthy and balanced diet. It doesn't just help our physical bodies, but it helps our brains as well. Limiting caffeine. This is another one that I'm sure is really difficult as a college student to have to limit that caffeine intake. I won't lie, it is hard now as somebody who works a full-time job to limit my caffeine intake. But too much caffeine can sometimes have that negative effect on us. It can cause your anxiety to spike, kind of shoot your nerves, and make you feel more overwhelmed. My biology professor in college taught us a great method of using caffeine in the most effective way, which was to, drink a cup of coffee or an energy drink, whatever your preferred method of caffeine is. Take a 20-minute nap, and then get up. Because by the time you have that 20-minute power nap, the caffeine will have kicked into your body. You'll have had that 20-minute rest, and it's going to give you some longevity to that caffeine intake. So just making sure, you're not drinking too much, and maybe using it in that kind of method so you get the most benefit from it. And also staying hydrated. This helps you to maintain your energy, maintain your concentration, and avoid some of those headaches that can come from too much caffeine consumption, too much time spent staring at a screen. So making sure you've got that proper water intake. And another part is studying smarter, not harder. Effective study techniques can improve retention and reduce stress. This can be done through things like practicing active recall, self-testing, and finding a distraction-free environment for better concentration. One of the recommended techniques is the Pomodoro technique. So this consists of choosing a singular task that you want to work on, focusing on that task for 25 minutes without distractions, without taking a break, and then after that 25 minutes, taking a 5-minute break. So that includes stepping away from your study space, stretching, taking a walk, getting a snack, however you want to spend that 5 minutes, and then repeating that cycle. You can do this as many times as you would like for however much time you feel you can dedicate it to. But it is important that after 4 cycles of studying for 5 minutes and then taking a 5-minute break, that you take a longer 15 to 30-minute break to recharge. Why this works is it helps you to maintain focus and prevent burnout. It encourages deep, thoughtful work in more short, manageable bursts. It can create a sense of urgency, but also reduces procrastination. And the breaks allow your brain to rest, improving retention and problem solving. Care is essential, not only year-round, but in particular during exam seasons. This can include taking breaks, engaging in hobbies. So whatever that is, it can be going outside, getting some fresh air, getting some sunlight, playing video games, watching TikTok, even things like that you might not necessarily consider self-care, can be a great way to help you to relax and de-stress. Self-care doesn't necessarily always have to look like the traditional, taking a hot bath, lighting some candles, the things that we tend to automatically think of when we hear self-care. It can really be any activity that brings you joy, helps you to relax, and doesn't cause harm to you or anybody else. So as much as it might be nice to, go relax and have a drink with friends or, engage in nicotine, things like that, those aren't really the best forms of self-care and often end up increasing our stress and increasing our anxiety. So making sure you have those healthy self-care habits. It's also important to stay connected with friends and seek support when needed. So, find somebody who has the same major as you, and that way you can work through problems together. You can discuss different classes together, and have that support when you feel like you need it. And again, setting realistic goals. So telling yourself going into college, I know that I did. When I was graduating high school, I was like, I'm going to go in, I'm going to get straight A's every single semester, but that was not necessarily realistic. I got to college and realized how much harder it was than high school, and did not get straight A's my first semester, which I was devastated by, and caused me a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. So realizing that you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to have these unobtainable goals, just being realistic and kind to yourself. And at the same time, celebrating small wins, even something as simple as getting your homework turned in on time. If it's been a really challenging task, a really challenging paper, but you get it done and you get it turned in time, even if you don't get the perfect grade on it, celebrate that small win of having the dedication and the wherewithal to get that task turned in on time. Celebrating small wins can actually kind of rewire your brain to feel, that happiness and that reward system more often. How to cope with exam anxiety. Some of those self-care techniques, avoiding last-minute cramming to reduce panic. And as silly as it sounds, practicing positive self-talk, reminding yourself of all the preparation that you've done, of all the studying that you've done, of all the classwork that you've done, and even positive self-affirmations. I know it sounds silly, but writing something on your mirror, like, I'm smart, I can do this, I have the knowledge. Things like that, while it might seem kind of silly, actually do have an effect on your mental health and the mental state you have going into a different. You can also use grounding techniques such as the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. To do this, you'll hold up your hand and you'll think first of 5 things that you can see. So look around your room, notice, a pet, a decoration, a picture frame. Doesn't have to be anything in particular, just 5 things that you can physically see. Next is 4 things that you can touch. When doing this, you want to focus on texture. So, a soft pillow, a hard desk, a hot cup of coffee, although not too hot. You don't want to burn yourself, of course. But 4 things that you can physically touch. Next is 3 things that you can hear. Really paying attention to background noises, like the ticking of a clock, the birds outside your window chirping, or even the sound of your own heartbeat or your own breathing. Next is 2 things that you can smell. This could be the scent of your cup of coffee, or the smell of a candle, or the fresh air coming through your window. You can also even think of your favorite scents. So if your favorite scent is fresh cut grass, but there's no fresh cut grass outside, just taking a moment and recalling that scent to memory can work for that as well. And lastly, 1 thing that you can taste. So get yourself a mint, a Hershey Kiss, a sip of your drink, but don't just automatically eat it or automatically drink it. Really kind of savor it in your mouth. Focus on that lingering taste, how it makes you feel, maybe positive memories that you have attached to that taste, even maybe how it feels on the inside of your mouth. All right, and lastly is creating a personalized plan. So I can't share in the chat, but I sent to Rebecca a form that I made that will allow you to create a personalized stress management and self-care plan. Some of the things on it include choosing 3 self-care strategies that work best for you, commitment to a daily relaxation practice for at least 10 minutes, and scheduling downtime into your study plans for balance. But it's about 2 pages long. It's much more in-depth than just those 3 there, but those are a few key points that you'll be able to cover in that personalized plan. I really encourage you to fill that out and even print it off so you have a physical copy with it of it. And please feel free to share that with your friends and your classmates as well. Just as we wrap up, remember that you are capable and prepared. Progress matters more than perfection, and reaching out for support when needed is a sign of strength. Exams, school, and grades do not define your worth. You define your worth. So believe in yourself, celebrate small victories, and maintain a positive perspective. I also lastly want to add that if you ever do need that extra layer of help, don't hesitate to reach out. Your schools have support, your communities have support. I'll make sure you guys have my information as well. Outside of things like this, a big part of what I do is getting people connected to mental health resources in the community. Everything from support groups to therapy to medication management. If you need that help, NAMI is there to help you guys.
Thank you, Megan. I love that you mentioned the Pomodoro technique. That's my personal favorite.
Yes, I really like it as well. I had not heard of it until recently, but it's really helpful.
All right, so we are going to go ahead and open up the questions and comments for both Megan and for Bill. I'm going to start with Bill. Can you give us a recommendation on how to get motivated to start a studying task? So for those students that know they have a task to hit, but they're not quite sure how to get themselves motivated to begin.
This is like the quintessential question. I'm sure everyone has dealt with this question at one point or another, and I know I deal with this question daily, so it's a good question. There are a lot of strategies you can use to get yourself motivated to start. I would say the hardest part is starting. So like with the desk method I talked about, studying in the same place, developing a habit, So after you get the ball rolling, it's pretty easy to keep studying, but starting is the hard part. And so I'd say two things that really help me are, first of all, I like to make a plan. So if you plan out what you plan to study each day, where you plan to be in the next week, the next month, next year, set these kinds of goals for yourself, outline, what you plan to do each day and how much you're going to study. That's a really helpful thing, in my opinion, to help you not get like overwhelmed by the amount of material you have to study, not just for USABO, but for any course. The second thing I'd say is to remove distractions. Boredom is a very strong motivating factor, and it's really easy to, or I should say, it's hard to study when you have so many easy things around you to default to, right? Like your phone, the latest Netflix show that you want to watch, a tub of ice cream. Like there's so many things that are so much easier than studying. And getting rid of those distractions is one of the big things that helps me study. I remember at the beginning, like when I was a freshman and I started studying, really studying seriously, one of the things I would do is I would just sit down at the desk. Even if I didn't want to study, I'd just sit down and flip the pages. And I'd get so bored that I'd start studying. And that's one way to approach it. If you're at that point, when I was so bored, I thought like I might as well just start reading. I'm already sitting down here, flipping through the pages. I'm not going to flip through pages for an hour. That's silly. Might as well start studying. But it's little things like this and getting rid of distractions that I think really help motivate you to study. That's how I'd say you should get started.
Thank you. Megan, do you want to jump in and give some feedback on that too? How to get motivated to start?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with everything that Bill said. Really good advice there. Creating a reward system for yourself too can be really helpful. So, if I get started and, 25 minutes from now, I get a piece of candy, I get to, reward myself with 5 minutes, of TikTok. But creating that reward system can kind of create those little dopamine hits and make you more motivated to continue studying and to continue getting those little rewards.
Megan, I was thinking as you're presenting, so where can someone start if they're in the middle of feeling overwhelmed, but they really need to engage in a task, like it is their only option, they need to get into this task? Do you have any techniques or recommendations if they are in the middle of feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I know that when you are on that time crunch and you're feeling really overwhelmed to get that task done, and you can't really gather your thoughts, even though the idea of stepping away for a few minutes can sound terrifying and overwhelming, I think it's really important that you take a break, you do something to relax, even if it's just 5 minutes, to gather your thoughts. And then when you come back, get organized and make a plan. I know that when I get overwhelmed, I'll spend 5 minutes on this task and then remember, oh no, I have this thing due, and I'll switch over to that task. And I end up not really making progress in either thing. So dedicating, for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to focus on this task, take a break, and in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to shift my focus to another task. That way you're kind of avoiding that back and forth and not really getting much progress done with either or multiple tasks that you're working on.
Do either one of you have recommendations on how to tackle that backwards planning aspect? So you talked a lot about like making your goals manageable and chunking them into smaller pieces. How would one get started in that process?
The biggest thing for me is I'm sort of a big picture guy. I think it's much easier to go from the big picture to the little details. And it's easy to get bogged down in the little details. So I'd say the first thing you should do is set a big goal. You should go from big to small goals. So for example, one goal I set for myself in my freshman year was finish campus biology. It's a pretty daunting task because that textbook has like 1,400 pages. So I thought, okay, this is my big goal. I'll set it. I want to complete it in a year. From there, I'd see, okay, this book is already broken down in chapters for me. So that's good. I can say there are 56 chapters in campus biology. So maybe I can do one like every week or something like that. There are 52 weeks in a year, right? So maybe one every week would be fine. And it would be a little past a year, but that's okay. And then from there, I'd say, okay, every week, if I want to finish a chapter, how much do I have to read, right? Now, not all the chapters are created equal. Some of them are longer than others, but I'd just go down and divide each one say like, okay, I want to read this many pages per day, and then leave 1 or 2 days so I can review the chapter or something like that. That's, I think, how I would approach it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, having that big, kind of overarching goal, but then breaking it down into, little sub goals that are easier to reach. So you're focusing on, those sub goals while ultimately working towards the big goal.
I also want to point out to our listeners, there's a reason why your teachers give you syllabi at the beginning of the year with all the dates for the class. That's a really useful tool for mapping out the entire year or the entire semester and helping with that planning piece. I didn't put 2 and 2 together until I reached college when it came to that one. So, all right, let's see. Anybody else, please drop your questions. These are really, really useful resources, and it's getting close to midterm season, I think, for you all. So I think it'll be very useful. We have a question for Bill. What was your craziest time that you studied for the USABO in a day?
Single day, I'd say the worst of it was in my sophomore year, okay? And I was studying for the semifinals exam, and USABO has 2 rounds, and they have an opens round and a semifinals round, and you have to be in the top 10% of scores in the opens to take the semifinals. And then if you're the top 20 in the nation in the semifinals, you go on to the national finals, right? It was about a week before the semifinals exam in my sophomore year, and I didn't make it the previous year. I was pretty mad. Okay, I was pretty salty. And so that one day I spent, I think, 6 hours studying continuously. And actually, compared to my peers, funnily enough, this actually isn't a lot. It sounds maybe like a lot at first glance, but it's not that much. Some of the crazy people I know spend 14 hours a day, or they have spent 14 hours a day before on several days. I like to take it easy. I'm more of a consistency guy. I don't really like studying continuously for long periods of time. It's not my style, but I'd say that was the worst of it. I took 2 exams that day, I think, and each semifinals practice exam is 2 hours, and I read about 4 chapters of Campbell's. So that was pretty horrible. I don't recommend studying for long periods of time. It's almost never effective. You should use the Pomodoro strategy or a similar strategy and divide up your time. It's much more effective and efficient.
And an add-on to that question was, what did you personally do when you were overwhelmed or you were bogged down when it came to studying?
Well, for me, you saw in the bio, one of my favorite things to do is to play ultimate frisbee, right? And I would recommend the thing about physical exercise that Megan was talking about is definitely accurate. A lot of the times when you're bogged down, you can be mentally tired, but a lot of the times it's because you actually are physically you have too much energy because you sat in the study desk all day and you haven't moved around. So you actually have too much energy, but your brain is tired. So what you really need to do is go out and spend all that physical energy. So play a sport, Frisbee was a great sport that I got introduced to actually at the USPO National Finals. Some people call it the nerd sport because it's a sport that a lot of Olympiad kids tend to play. We're all skinny, so we play Frisbee instead of football because it's safer. But I got introduced to it, and it's a really fun sport. It's a good sport for cardio, and it doesn't really take a lot of prerequisites. You don't have to be super tall like basketball or anything like that. So it's definitely a good sport. Yeah, I would say just choose any sport that you like. When you're tired of studying, go out and see some sun, play a sport with your friends.
All right, we had another question come in to the Q&A for Bill. When did you place at USABO, and what edition of Campbell would you recommend the most?
I placed so I made the national finals, which is the top 20 of the nation in 23 and 24. So that was last year and the year before that. And this year I have to take the test pretty soon, actually in about a week. I'm a little nervous. And then in my junior year, which was last year, I made the IBO. So that was after you make the national finals, you go through some more testing and they select the top 4. Yeah, I would say for Campbell's editions, any edition above 8th edition is probably good enough. Some people have preferences. A fun fact for you, you get a free edition of Campbell's every time you make the camp. So I had an edition of Campbell's when I started studying, but after I made camp, since I made camp twice, now I have 3 editions. I'm using one as a laptop stand right now, actually. So right now I'm reading the newest edition, but I bought, I think, 2 editions before that. there's not too big of a difference. Any addition before after 8th, like I said, should be good enough for your purposes. But if you're able to buy newer editions, then I would say go for the newer ones.
Awesome. I think we got one more question in the Q&A, and it is, what strategy of studying did you personally use?
I'd say the biggest one for me was Anki. I was crazy about Anki in my freshman year. I've gotten a little less Anki crazy as I've gone through, but it's really such a great resource. A fun fact, I have a really bad memory. Okay, I took some memory tests against my friends at camp and at school, and I always lose. I really have a terrible memory. But if you use these kind of strategies, you don't need to have a good memory to succeed. Like there's this misconception that USABO campers or national finalists are all like photographic memory, these sort of like geniuses. That's not how it works. Like we sink a lot of hours into studying. You need to use all sorts of strategies to get ahead, right? So yeah, I'd say definitely Anki is the biggest one for me. And make your own flashcards. Don't steal a flashcard set online. That's a big thing.
Thank you so much. Knowing that you are currently studying for USABO makes it so much more, amazing that you've decided to join us today. And then also thank you to Megan Elliott for joining us today, sharing all of those resources. I'll slide in one last question that just came into the Q&A, and then we're going to move into our closing remarks. So, final question, how do you build your intuition better, and what resources are there?
So like I said, the biggest thing to build intuition is always to do practice problems. So when you register for USABO, your teacher will get access to a bunch of resources which you can use. That includes past tests, and some of those are also available online. So that's probably a good starting point. Campbell's Biology is a great introductory biology textbook for knowledge. And aside from that, when you get more advanced, there's like a long string of textbooks that people use. You don't really need to use them, but they do help when you get into the upper echelons of the competition, right? So over there, actually, so my study desk is over there, and I have this table with about 30 textbooks just like stacked up high on that. It's pretty funny looking, but some of the more common ones people use, aside from Campbell's, people use a textbook called Vander's for human physiology. There's a textbook called Ravens for plant physiology and anatomy. I personally haven't read that one all the way through yet, but it's on my list. There's a textbook called Albert's. People use that for cell biology. That one's really, really long. It's almost 2,000 pages. There's also Brooker's Genetics. That's my favorite textbook of all time. I love genetics. It's like my thing. And aside from that, there are a bunch of other miscellaneous ones that people use. But honestly, aside from those, and even just with Campbell's, if you do enough practice problems and you train yourself in a efficient way, you really won't need to sink thousands of dollars into textbooks. Like that's ridiculous. So yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for answering that last question. Thank you to both of our speakers, Bill and Megan. It was awesome to have you all. It's a critical skills area that I think we all need to review and just look over and take in. So we are going to go into our closing remarks. I'd like to first thank our sponsors for STEM Lyceums, including the Claude Moore Charitable Foundation. Without them, we would not be able to make these programs cost-free to all of our students. So thank you to our sponsors. Once again, thank you to our speakers, Bill and Megan. They dropped their contact information in the chat and in their slides. So if you have additional questions, you can email me at rebecca.carter@cee.org, or you can email Megan and or Bill. All registrants will be receiving the personal self-care plan that Megan shared with me when I emailed you with the video recording. So thank you, everybody. Please remember to fill out the post-webinar survey, and thank you all for joining us.